You know that feeling, the one that arrives before you see them. The slight acceleration of everything, the awareness that increases suddenly of your own heartbeat. The thoughts that reorganize themselves around this single person without your permission. That feeling, you decided, was attraction. That feeling, you decided, meant something. And maybe it did. But here's the question nobody asked you, and that you probably never asked yourself. Was what you were feeling attraction, or was it anxiety? And do you actually know the difference? Because here is the uncomfortable truth that sits at the center of this video. They feel almost identical. Physiologically, neurologically, in the body, in the moment, with no outside reference point to distinguish them. The racing heart, the heightened awareness, the inability to think about anything else. Anxiety produces all of it. So does attraction. And if you cannot tell them apart, if your nervous system has learned, through enough repetition, to mislabel one as the other, then some of the most significant relationships of your life may have been built on a misread signal. Welcome to Thought Paradox. Today we are going somewhere genuinely strange. The place where your nervous system has been telling you a story about love, and the story has not always been accurate. Let us start with the science, because this is not speculation. In 1974, psychologists Donald Dutton and Arthur Aaron conducted one of the most famous experiments in the history of attraction research. They had an attractive researcher approach men either on a stable, low bridge or on a high, swaying suspension bridge that induced fear and physiological arousal. The men on the frightening bridge were significantly more likely to call the researcher afterward, to interpret their arousal as attraction, and to rate her as more attractive. The fear, the genuine physiological fear produced by crossing a dangerous bridge, was being misread as romantic interest. The researchers called this misattribution of arousal. The body produces a state. The mind, searching for an explanation for that state, looks at the environment and attributes it to whatever is most salient. In this case, the person standing in front of them. The arousal was fear. The mind decided it was attraction. Now apply that to relationships. When you are around someone who makes you nervous, who is unpredictable, emotionally unavailable, whose approval feels uncertain, whose presence produces a low-grade stress response in your nervous system, your body is in a state of arousal. And your mind, searching for what that arousal means, looks at the most salient thing in the environment, the person, and decides this must be attraction. This must be chemistry. This feeling, this heightened, consuming, can't stop thinking about them feeling, must be what love feels like. It is not always love. Sometimes it is anxiety wearing love's clothes, and the two are almost impossible to distinguish from the inside. Let us be specific about what anxiety and attraction share physiologically, because the overlap is not metaphorical. It is literal. Both activate the sympathetic nervous system, the system responsible for fight, flight, and heightened alertness. Both produce elevated heart rate. Both produce heightened sensory awareness, the feeling that everything is slightly more vivid, more present, more charged. Both produce intrusive, repetitive thinking, the inability to stop the mind from returning to the source of the activation. Both produce physical restlessness, the difficulty sitting still, the need to check the phone, the inability to fully concentrate on anything else. Both produce a heightened sensitivity to the other person's signals, every text, every look, every tone of voice carrying more weight than it would in a neutral state. From the inside, in the moment, these experiences are neurologically almost identical. The difference is not in the feeling. The difference is in what is producing the feeling. And that distinction, which seems like it should be obvious, is one of the most consistently missed pieces of information in the history of human relationships. Now here is where this stops being theoretical and starts being painful. Because the misattribution of arousal does not just affect brief encounters on bridges. It shapes long-term relationship patterns in ways that are profound and largely invisible. The unavailable person who feels like chemistry. You have met someone. Something feels electric, charged, like this person could matter in a way that most people do not. And they are, look at this carefully, not fully available. Not emotionally present, not consistent, not fully invested. Sending signals that are warm and then cool, present and then distant. And your nervous system is in a constant low-grade state of uncertainty, monitoring, hoping, bracing, reaching. That state produces arousal. The arousal gets attributed to the person. The attribution becomes the conviction that this must be significant. This is what chemistry feels like. This is what real attraction feels like. This is the one. And the availability of the less charged person, the one who is consistent, who texts back, who makes their interest clear, does not produce that state. So they feel less significant, less like the real thing. When what is actually happening is that the available person does not activate your anxiety. And without the anxiety, the misattribution does not occur. And without the misattribution, the feeling does not rise to the level you have learned to associate with love. The relationship that lives on conflict. In some relationships, the conflict itself becomes the source of the charge. The argument, the rupture, the reconciliation. That cycle produces exactly the neurological cocktail that gets misread as passion. The couple who fights constantly and cannot stay away from each other. The relationship that is exhausting and consuming and feels more alive than anything either person has experienced. The conviction, shared and reinforced, that the intensity proves the love is real. The intensity proves the nervous system is activated. That is not the same thing. Genuine love can be intense, but intensity is not evidence of love. It is evidence of arousal, and arousal has many sources. The physical response as confirmation. You see them across the room, and something happens in your body. Your heart rate increases. Your attention narrows. The room becomes less interesting than this person. And you take that physical response as confirmation. Of course I feel this way about them. My body is telling me. But the body is not always a reliable narrator of attraction. The body is a reliable narrator of arousal. And arousal, in the absence of context, in the presence of someone unfamiliar or uncertain or charged, is information about your nervous system's state, not necessarily about the person in front of you. If the misattribution of arousal were simply a neurological accident, it would presumably correct itself over time. We would learn. We would notice the pattern. We would update. But many people do not update. The confusion persists across relationships, across years, across accumulated evidence that the charged feeling has not reliably led to the good outcomes it promised. Why? Because for many people, the confusion was installed early. The first experiences of strong emotion, of love, of attachment, of the feeling of mattering to someone, arrived in the same package as uncertainty, anxiety, and the need to work for connection. The nervous system did not learn, love feels like safety. It learned, love feels like this particular quality of heightened, uncertain, effortful activation. And so every subsequent experience of that activation gets labeled love. Not because the person lacks intelligence or self-awareness, but because the label is being applied by the part of the nervous system that learned what love is before the mind had any ability to evaluate or correct it. This is not a thinking problem. It is a learning problem, and it requires a different kind of correction than insight alone can provide. The goal is not to stop feeling strongly about people. The goal is to become a more accurate reader of what you are actually feeling. And that accuracy develops through practice, through deliberate attention, through the slow accumulation of data about your own nervous system. Ask where the feeling lives in your body. Attraction and anxiety, while physiologically similar, do tend to have slightly different qualities when examined carefully. Anxiety tends to produce constriction, tightness in the chest or throat, a quality of bracing. Attraction, genuine, uncomplicated attraction to someone safe, tends to produce more expansion, warmth, a quality of leaning toward rather than bracing. These are subtle distinctions. They require practice to identify. But beginning to pay attention to the quality of the feeling, not just its intensity, is the first step toward reading it more accurately. Ask what the feeling is responding to. Is the intensity correlated with the person's presence, or is it correlated with their unavailability? Does the feeling increase when they are warm and accessible, or does it increase when they pull back, go quiet, become uncertain? If the charge intensifies with distance rather than with presence, if the uncertainty is what produces the feeling more than the person, that is important information about what the nervous system is actually responding to. Stay in the relationship past the anxiety phase. The initial period of any relationship with someone new involves a degree of uncertainty that produces genuine arousal. For people who confuse anxiety with attraction, this period can feel like the most charged, most significant, most real part of any relationship. And the settling that comes as the relationship becomes more established, as the person becomes more knowable, more predictable, more safe, can feel like the charge is fading. The practice is to stay past that settling, to discover what is there when the anxiety resolves. Sometimes what is there is depth, warmth, genuine compatibility that was always present but obscured by the arousal. Sometimes what is there is less than expected, but the information is more accurate, because it is not being filtered through the anxiety that made everything feel more significant than it was. The feeling was real, every time. The racing heart, the obsessive thinking, the consuming quality of the connection. All of it real. The question was only ever what the feeling was actually about. And the answer, some percentage of the time, is that it was about your nervous system's response to uncertainty. To someone who activated your threat detection system at the same time as your longing. To the particular combination of warmth and unavailability that your history taught you to recognize as love. That is not a failure of intelligence. That is a nervous system doing what nervous systems do, labeling states in the fastest, most automatic way available to them, with the labels learned earliest, in the rooms where love was first understood. The work is not to stop feeling. The work is to develop, slowly and with patience, a more precise vocabulary for what you are feeling. To ask in the charged moments, not just, is this real, but what is this real about? To let the body's signal be the beginning of a question rather than the end of one. Because you deserve to know the difference between the person who makes you anxious and the person who makes you feel alive. They are not always the same person, and knowing the difference is the beginning of choosing better. I am thought paradox. If this reframed something you have been misreading for a long time, Share it with someone who needed the same reframe. See you in the next one.